I am vengeance. I am the night. I am.
Hey everyone, Brian here, Fiery Squirrel. Today I'm going to show you how I made and painted this metal bat design. This thing is not real metal, but it is painted to look that way. And I had a lot of people ask me how I got this effect just using basic paint and a couple of, rattle can spray techniques. So in this video I'm going to show you how I built this thing and a lot of the paint techniques I used to make it look like metal. Also in this video I'm going to try to use more voice inflection so that I don't sound like I am like nuts. Yes. Hopefully it'll be a little more interesting and I won't sound like I'm dying. Oh, let's go. What do you think? Too much? Did I overdo it? Yeah. Okay. So to start with, these lines were vectored out in Illustrator, and everything was cut on an Aeon Laser Mira 9. That was a moth, that was not the bat. Here's the bat. The bat was in 3 layers. Here's 2 of them. The back layer was just the solid shape, and just 3 stacked on top of each other, glued together. And I kind of cheated on these rivets. These are real metal. I've made one before where these were actually just flat discs that were made to look like metal with everything else, but this time I decided to actually make it more complicated, drill holes and put these shiny metallic furniture tacks in there. I've seen some people use googly eyes to get this effect because they're just little domes. So I could have done that, but I wanted these things because obviously they're way more durable. So lots of holes drilled, and I CA glued the suckers in so that they wouldn't ever come out. And once they were in, yeah, they went all the way through. They were a little bit longer than those 3 layers that I had glued up for the bat, so I had to grind them all off with a cutting wheel on a Dremel. Lots of sparks flying, lots of little hot shards of metal lying around. It was a fun step. And later on, it was completely flush. It was nice and smooth. So, time for paint. All right, first layer is primer. Just plain white flat primer. Put this on from a couple of different angles to try to get all the corners, and there were 2 coats. 2 coats of white primer, about 10 minutes apart. And if at all possible, this should definitely be done when it is not hot or humid, or there will be consequences. If you've ever used spray glue or spray paint in less than ideal conditions, you know. I did the back also. I gave it a coat on the back because some people have told me, people who know, that this masonite, this hardboard that I use to cut this, it'll warp if you don't do both sides. Alright, this is automotive filler primer, and this is probably the heaviest spray coat that I did, and I'm pretty sure I did 3 coats of filler primer from several different angles. And what I wanted to do with this was just fill in all those corners. After that, after it was completely dry, time to sand your life away, which is just so thrilling, obviously. This probably wasn't 100% necessary, ironically. Since I wanted a kind of a rundown weathered metal look, this probably was not something that had to happen. But for this project, I did want to have a smooth surface. So this is 220 grit that I'm using, And it took a while because all these recesses and layers had to get sanded. Alright, last type of primer, I promise. Flat gray primer. Because obviously, as you can see, it's much darker. Much darker than the automotive filler primer, which after it was sanded, it was almost a white. It was really, really light. Don't forget the sides. If you're doing something dimensional like this, definitely get the sides of it. Alright, this is Liquitex black acrylic paint. Squeeze some into a baby food jar, added water to make an acrylic blackwash. This is the way that we start making this gray surface look like weathered metal. And it's I don't know, it takes some practice, kind of up to you how much water you add to how much paint. You can see what I used just now. Try to get a mixture that is definitely, you know, black, dark, but that also flows well, because the reason I'm doing this is to get this black wash down into the recesses. You see how I'm doing the lowest level first, and I was using that small brush, and after that then I can get the big brush and smear it all over everything else. But I really want this black wash to get into the corners and the lowest parts. Again, don't forget the edges, the sides. Had to get all the sides of the bat with the acrylic black wash. Now, it's kind of terrifying because it's super dark now, and you can see it's kind of getting uneven, and that's good. That's what we want. But you don't want to leave it on here for too terribly long, because obviously the longer you leave it on, the darker the entire thing is going to be. And that too can be a bit of a guessing game. I think I left this on, I couldn't remember, 7, 8 minutes. But the important thing to remember is wipe it off, which I did not actually film here. I'm sorry. So this is your reminder. Don't leave it on. Wipe it off. Old t-shirt, big towel you don't care about. Get that black wash off your art project, because if you leave it there, it may turn out much, much darker than you want. Again, wipe the black wash off. Alright, second black wash is actually Black India ink. It is not acrylic paint. This is another step that's probably not 100% necessary, but I like the effect that the ink gives. It's more fluid than paint, it's darker than the paint, and it just stains it a little bit different, and it gives it a little more depth and dimension. It is much darker, can you tell? Much darker than the acrylic black wash was, and every time I do this I get nervous because it went jet black. But if I remember correctly, I definitely did not leave this stuff on as long as I did the acrylic black wash. And fortunately this time I did remember to take video of wiping it down. Just a nice big, I think this is an old beach towel. And in a minute I think I'll show you. Yeah, you can see the difference, right? So only a few minutes, and then wipe that stuff off until you've got, see how it's down in those recesses around the edges, down in the corners. You can still see a lot of it there. That is definitely what we want to see. Here it is after the ink wash had completely dried. You'll see it's smudged, it's uneven, it's building up to get some depth of simulated weathering and grime. This is where we want to go. Alright, this is one of the most important steps to making this look metal. Silver liquid leaf and a stiff bristle brush. That's a square brush. I've used silver acrylic, silver paint pens, I think. But this stuff, this silver liquid leaf, I've found is the brightest silver. It is pretty durable, and I don't know. I think it works better than any of the other options that I've used for silver edging. So this is dry brushing, and if you don't know what dry brushing is, I mean, it's all you do is get the silver on the brush just a little bit, and I mean, you might even wipe it off the brush to where there's just a little bit. It's not running on the bristles of the brush at all. It's barely there, and then you pick and drag it over wherever you want the dry brushing to go. See, I'm wiping it off on the edge of that little bottle. Don't want too much on, and I'm actually wiping off a little more on the sheet underneath on the drop cloth. So it's not going to take much, and you may go a little crazy, you know, going back and forth between the actual bottle of silver and actually putting it on. But look what it does. It gets a nice silvered edge wherever you passed it, on the protruding corners and on the risen places like the rivets. I definitely put more on those parts. Part of making this look like convincing metal is trying to figure out, if this were real metal, you know, which edges, which sections would take the most abuse? Where would it be most scuffed up? And you know, it's going to be outside corners protruding out, and it's going to be risen surfaces, raised surfaces like the rivets. And all the while you want to make it irregular. See, some of it I drag it out just a little bit further out. You don't want it to be totally uniform. You want this to look a little bit messy. And it took a while, because again, we've got 3 layers of 1/8" hardboard here, and all these little, you know, customized cutouts that I designed, these irregular geometric shapes. They all created edges that had to be silvered, had to be dry brushed. So it took a while. Alright, dry brushing for silver is done. This is going to be rust. Those are the colors I used for the rust. And I probably should not have mixed these both up at the same time. Basically, I'm going to have a lighter rust color, which is this one right here, kind of a ochre, and a darker rust color, which is mostly brown with some maybe a little black and white to even it out with gray, and maybe a little, just a tad of red also. But the dark color goes on first. Dark goes on first, and I mean, it took a while, which is why I shouldn't have mixed them both at the same time, but just to get a feel for both of them at once, there they are. Trying to get a feel for where the rust goes. I mean, I did look at pictures of rust, okay? Just Google rust texture, or rusted metal, and you'll have an excellent idea of what it's going to look like. And, you know, rust is, it's going to go where it wants to go. It could go up high, down low, but again, kind of like with the blackwashes, I stuck with the recesses first. I got down in the inside. I'm using the same stiff bristle brush that I was using for, well, basically everything else so far. And here goes the dark rust color into the corner. And I was constantly wiping it around with my fingertips, because you don't want like a straight jump between brown paint and the dark gray that you've already got there. See how you can definitely tell, until I wipe it away, that it would totally look like brushed on paint. You don't want to do that. Another tricky part of this step is trying not to let the rust get on top of the nice silver edging that you've got so far. See, I've got some that was over that silver edge, but that's one of the reasons I kept wiping it away. Like I'd get that rust on top of the nice shiny edge, and then I'd wipe it off. Just wipe it back off, and it goes on if you're using, regular painting acrylics like I was. It goes on pretty shiny. And you want to build up a lot of texture. You'll see some of these places really have, like, it's just glopped on there. And that's good because, rust has actual texture. So put it on heavy in some places. Like here, for example. Now it's dry, but you can definitely see right there and up here near the rivet, you can see actual texture formed from where I slapped on the paint real heavy. And that's what rust will actually do. Rust, after it builds up for a while, will start to deform and build up. And so, last step of the rust. Again, this is going to be kind of a dry brushing step. That's why I'm wiping it off a little bit. I just want a little bit of that lighter rust color. And I'm going to look for the places on the dark rust layer that are raised, that have that built up texture. And I'm going to hit those. I want to get the top parts. So I'm not using much pressure. I'm just scraping the top part of that heavily built up dark brown. And see, if you put it on, a little too heavy there, just smear it around. Fingertips or with a little sponge or a rag or something. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, you want it to look a little messy. That's the effect I was trying to get. Definitely want that rust layer to be multi-tonal, multiple chromas, to give it a little more of a convincing quality. Real rust is not all the same color. Alright, there it is, time for the clear coat. Please remember, matte clear. Matte, or in other words, flat clear coat. I would not put on satin or gloss clear coats. Leave it raised. I use those dangerous, sharp-looking little triangle pyramid thingies to keep it off the surface I was spraying on. And this step especially, folks, if you are putting a clear coat on your artwork, you have got to have it in a controlled environment. If it is too hot, it is going to ruin it. So please be careful when you do that. It was too thin, so I JB welded a sawtooth hanger on the back of it. Didn't want to drive nails through it again. And that was basically it. Let the thing dry, which that clear coat dries pretty quick. I believe it was 2 coats of matte clear spray. And that actually knocked back that silver a little bit. That silver doesn't really look like silver anymore. It's flattened out. It's not too shiny, which is what you wanted. There it is in its home in the man cave. I just putting it there for display. It's probably not going to stay there, but it looked cool over a dark futon under a widescreen with an Xbox. And that's how I do it. That's my method. Hope you found this useful. I still kind of sounded like I was dying, but laser links are down below in case you want to buy one. They are affiliate links. Happy painting. I'll see you next time.